Hey, welcome. Today on the show, we have Greg Newbloom. Greg is a co-founder and current leader of the company Membrion. They spun out of the University of Washington with a proprietary new material that membranes could be made out of that make them more durable than traditional membranes. If you haven't been following along or are not familiar with why membranes are important or even what they are, uh, the short of it is they're extremely important in how we are able to access fresh water, period, or any type of water anywhere. So this innovation, this proprietary material, has been very significant on its impact in the wastewater industry. Not only that, but Greg has an incredible depth of experience in entrepreneurship itself and the perspective of going from lab to what is now a company with around 40 to 50 employees actively commercializing and making stable revenue. It was a really enjoyable conversation. I know you will enjoy it too. Shout out to our sponsors, Cleantech Growth Lab. If you're looking to grow in clean tech, they are the people to do it with, and the producers of this podcast, Craze and Friends. And with that, I give you Greg. Oh, welcome to another episode of The Grove. Shout out to our sponsors mentioned just before this. Without them, it would not be possible to interview awesome people doing awesome things like Greg. Welcome.
Thanks. Great to be here.
That's right. Without any more of an introduction, because I've done a lot of reading. I'm trying to understand this membrane technology, but I'm excited to hear it from you. If you could just give a brief introduction of yourself and what you're building.
Absolutely. Yeah. So my name's Greg Newbloom. I'm the founder and CEO of Membrion. Membrion's just about to turn 10 years old as a clean tech spin out from the University of Washington. And we're commercializing a new advanced membrane technology. So we're the first ones to figure out how to make a ceramic membrane that can desalinate water, which allows us to go into a lot of really complex environments where it might otherwise be challenging to treat and recycle that wastewater. And so the thing that makes us really unique is, unlike a traditional desalination membrane where you are using pressure to push water across, kind of like a coffee filter, our membranes function a lot more like a kidney, where you're actually able to remove the contaminants and leave clean water behind. And so it gives us a lot more flexibility in how we treat streams in handling these really harsh environments.
Well, I can already tell this is going to go a lot better than my personal research into this technology. So you guys, well, the first thing, when you say ceramic, we're not talking about like ceramic mug. Like what does ceramic mean in this context?
Yeah, so ceramic in this context means that you're right. It's not like a mug. In fact, the membranes that we make are incredibly flexible. They're made from ceramic material. So in this case, it's silica that we use. And actually, the material itself is, you're probably familiar with, as the silica gel desiccant packs you find in a shoebox beef
Mm.
jerky pack that keeps your food or clothes nice and dry, is the same materials we use to make our membranes. And so, we do a lot more kind of chemistry and structuring them into nanomaterials, but the fundamental material is the same. And so yeah, it's that basically that those materials are incredibly good at going into harsh environments without having things stick to them or chemically degrade them or cause them issues, that allows us to do some interesting things. So
Cool. All right. So, obviously follow-up questions to that, but taking a step back, you mentioned that this was a spin out
mhm.
of the university. Had you always gone into your life looking around saying, I can't wait to start my own business, or is this something that just happened?
I started my first company when I was 10. So there was definitely some entrepreneurial spirit there
Was it
that
ceramics?
existed. It was not ceramics. No,
Okay.
I was selling snacks at my brother's baseball game, and so became a vital part of the community. Learned a lesson when I eventually got kicked out by the league, as they found out that it's a really good way to make money off
Oh,
of
nice. Hey,
unsuspecting parents. So I learned the important lessons about competition at a young age. But no, I eventually, like, for me, wanted to go into engineering. Like, I like solving hard, interesting problems. And during my PhD, the kind of opportunity to do something entrepreneurial came back up again a couple different times. So Membrion is, beyond that kind of first company as a kid. Actually helped to start two other companies during my PhD, and Membrion's my third. And so, from that perspective, the entrepreneurial activities very much feel like a good fit for me and the types of things that I like to do, and combining the like hard technical and commercial problems together is something that I really enjoy.
Well, so for someone that knows people doing PhDs personally,
Hmm.
I can attest this, but also for people that may not know, it seems like again, from my perspective, not having done it, when you're doing PhD, you have this amount of time, none to do anything else. So I'm curious how you started not one but two companies during your PhD and how that came about.
Yeah, I mean, so I think that I had a really great PhD advisor, and she allowed us to kind of pursue interesting side projects. And so I had a few different of those during my PhD. One was a source of funding that we had that was really different from what I was working on at my PhD, that required me to put a little bit of time towards a separate project that ended up, becoming a new technology for converting slash piles or forestry waste into biochar that could then be used as soil amendments,
Well,
a way to to capture it instead. So yeah.
wait, question. Just had a
Uh-huh.
really interesting conversation 2 weeks ago with one of, I guess you call him a friend who
Hmm.
we've never met in person, but he's based in Thailand and he is pushing a huge development of biochar over there.
Sure.
So just quickly, to whatever degree you want to talk on it, what is your take on biochar?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a massive opportunity for biochar in particular markets and applications. So I think that like it is a really high value soil amendment, good at fixing carbon long term. I would say that for me, I didn't go far enough with it on the commercial side, because it was kind of the first couple of years of my PhD. We developed the tech, the company spun out, and I decided that I wasn't going to quit my PhD in order to kind of keep tracking with the company. Wanted to instead kind of focus on my research. So from that perspective, I would say I never really got into the depths of it. So
Got it.
I've got enough of an understanding to get myself
Yeah,
into
yeah, yeah.
trouble, not enough to speak super intelligently about it. So
How did they do after that? Is the company still
they
around, or did they also
not
just
anymore. They stuck around for a few years, and had some good, like, prototypes. Made
okay?
some adjustments beyond the initial scope, but ultimately the kind of
Okay.
company ended up winding down. So
Good. Appreciate that. All right,
yeah.
next. So the second one after that.
The second one was based on work that I'd done during my PhD, which was around organic solar cells, and kind of materials that can absorb light. And we created this material which we could uh, uh, tune the shape and the size of, and we were using it basically with this company as an additive for paints and coatings, to make them anti-static. So the idea being that, you know and a lot of this work was initially with Boeing, where there was an interest in their composite airplanes. Have some challenges with static electricity, and so being able to create a thin, transparent coating that could manage that was really valuable, or potentially valuable, to them. And so we this material that showed really good progress towards that end. And so that was really the basis for this second company, which spun out based on that core research, core patent, came out of the university.
Did the same thing happen where you were faced with an opportunity of that continuing to work and you said, I don't want to leave my PhD yet?
No, this one actually came right at the end of my PhD, is when
Oh, got it.
we started
Okay.
it. And so I actually then kind of took that post PhD, and helped run with that
Oh,
with a
wow.
small team, and learned a ton. It was one of those opportunities. Company's not around anymore. Ended up going under not too long. A lot of challenges around, like, how do you bring a new material into the paints and coating space? Really complex. integration problems from a technology standpoint. We were working in markets with really long adoption cycles. We think water is long. Aerospace is 5 times as long to adopt a new
Uh-huh.
technology, and so those were like really like great learnings. Learned a lot about composition of like team and how to be able to pitch and work with investors and things like that. So learned a lot, but ultimately, got to kind of the end of like, hey, we're running out of money. What are we gonna do? I got student
Yeah, yeah,
loans. Like, I gotta figure out what's next.
yeah.
And so uh, ended up coming back to the university, and that was actually basically on a project where my advisor said like, hey, look, like things are not going well. Like if you need a year, I can get you a year of funding. Come land, figure out what you want to do next with your life.
Oh, that's
Like you get
so
so it was
amazing.
really great. Like, right, it's a very soft landing. Like, okay, I'll figure it out. And I came back, and that project happened to be on membranes. And
Oh,
so,
no way.
and
That's
so
crazy.
that's really where like Membrion started, was just in this interim. Like, I got to apply for jobs. I got to figure out other things. I wasn't necessarily coming back to like, oh, I'm for sure going to start
Right.
another
And you're
company.
like,
Like,
wait, I have an idea.
uh-huh, yeah, yeah. And then ended up, coming up with it kind of within that first year. And then, yeah, the rest is history. So,
Wow, that's funny. So I think that's really cool that you were able to go into the water space. People are like, hey, watch out, long adoption cycles, sales cycles, and you're like, no, this is short.
yeah,
Like
short,
it's,
way
I'm
shorter,
excited.
way
I'm
shorter.
excited for this. Exactly. Okay. Well, I a question that I love to ask, although not all the time do we get people that have fully invested in companies, grown them, and then decided to walk away from them. So,
Mhm.
so I'm excited about this portion, but if you could choose one, two things, you rattled off a lot, but one or two things specific from that experience of running a company that you ended up walking away from that specifically shaped or shapes still how you navigate running Membrion.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I think that I mean there's a lot that shaped kind of the early days, especially of Membrion. I think the first thing is definitely team composition. We spun the technology out. It was really, it was a team of like-minded people, right? A lot of like scientists, engineers, and we were going to kind of figure stuff out and realize that, there's a lot more to running a business than being able to create a good, compelling technology that's better than the next thing that's available. There's running a company requires lots of different functional skills and expertise, and we didn't have that, and we were trying to kind of learn on the job how to do those things. And I think ultimately that just creates slow execution. And I think speed is, for better or for worse, is often the name of the game. For a startup, it's about how quickly you can move. So it's not, could we figure it out? Yeah, absolutely. If we had
Right.
the time and the money to do it, sure. But if you're in that pressure cooker, the people you have next to you matter a lot. And so when I started Membrion, that was one of the first things that I did, was actually look and say, hey, who can I bring alongside me on the core team that has walked this or a similar journey before. So.
Yeah, quick injection
Mhm,
because another interesting conversation I had 2 weeks ago was with this woman who had just left this place called the Engine
mhm,
in Boston.
yep.
Nice. So she was in charge of the ecosystem. She's going to lead chief of staff at a small company. Pretty
Mhm,
much our entire conversation was about exactly what you're speaking. Clearly, you did it well. So, how when you have this thesis of I need to find people that have walked this before and are like-minded, did you go in your personal network? Did you how did you find them? And then ultimately, how did you arrive at the decision, to bring them on? Because those are pretty ambiguous things. Those are things, hard decisions to make.
yeah, absolutely. So when I started, I'd spun Membrion out, and we had a great ecosystem within the University of Washington that I leaned
Okay.
into a lot more the second time around, or the third time around, rather, in kind of finding these individuals that I felt like really could add something to this. And so I connected with via the UW's like tech transfer office and the entrepreneurial activities and support that they had, really connected with an individual who had experience basically building uh, a deep tech company from founding to exit. And he was one of the mentors in that program. And he and I just ended up really like clicking well. Like I think that's really like a fundamental component is like when we started working, it was just like, hey, I'm trying to figure this stuff out. I need help. You've got experience. Like, let me kind of come to you. And eventually that, over the course of probably 6 months or a year morphed into me frequently going to this person and saying, hey, I could really use your help. I could really use your help. And then at some point I was like, hey, actually, maybe it just makes sense for you to come and like join in what we're doing. And actually at the time, I was basically stepped out of the CEO role and made him CEO of the company. He actually ran the company for kind of the first 2.5 years
Wow.
that we were starting to get out. He helped do our lead our seed round and kind of get that spun out. He brought in a really close contact that he had on the operations side. That also joined the company, and so the three of us really kind of helped to get to the company to an early stage. And so that was, bringing like finding someone else that was non-technical, right? Like he knew technology, but he was much more of a commercial leader. That made a huge difference in getting the company off the ground and to a point where I could then see like, oh, hey, look, this is actually how you do those things as opposed to trying to figure it all out myself.
Sure.
Is I got to shadow someone who really knew what they were doing.
Oh man, well, I have a feeling I got a lot of questions for you just about the business side, but I
Sure.
do want to get to your technology. So
Yeah.
I'll ask about just one other thing that you could pull from the experience with the prior company, the
Mhm.
coding company that significantly impacts Membrion.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the biggest thing is like, and this continues to be true at Membrion is, there is there's nothing quite like getting the voice of your customer integrated into what you're building early. I think especially as like someone with a PhD, an engineering background, it's really easy to fall in love with your technology and all the
Mhm.
cool things it can do. It's amazing. It's better than the other stuff that's there. And so you kind of build up this idea of like why wouldn't someone want this, right? Like it is better. I can prove with data that this is better. And then you learn like there's a million reasons why someone doesn't want something better than what they're doing today. And maybe you're not even solving a problem they really care about at the end of the day or that makes a big enough impact for them. And so I think that was one of the things that I wasn't that we didn't talk to customers, but the way we talked to customers was more in a way to try to validate our thinking as opposed to arrive at what they needed and a problem that was truly worth solving. And so I think for Membrion, that was something that we brought in early was really being able to identify like who is willing to buy this, who's actually willing to write a check, because that says a lot more than just someone who says, hey,
Yeah.
yeah, this is cool, I'm willing to do it. And then really leaning into and making tough decisions to walk away from opportunities because even though it could be a good fit, it's not going to be the right commercial fit, and you gotta get to revenue to really make a company work. And so yeah, I think that was a really key learning around how to do customer discovery, how to really learn and understand a customer problem. And it's a big challenge for new materials like Membrion because there's dozens of different markets we can go after. Water is one of them. It's one of many. And so, from that perspective, how do you pick just one when you can do so
Right.
much? How do you say
Well,
no to all the other stuff, right? That's where we're at.
oh, that was my follow-up question is I think it might be, I don't know if easy is the word, but maybe more clear, this far into it. But at the beginning, how do you know which customers are the right ones to be listening to? And even if you choose which ones are the right ones, how do you decide that what they're saying is actually in their best interest?
Yeah. So I think it's it's really hard when you're in like it's easier to reflect on it with hindsight than it is when you're in the
Yeah.
middle of it. I think that for us it's really it's finding people that are are actually willing to like pull you faster than you would otherwise maybe want to move. And I think that there's something, because then, at some point you have to assess, like, is this problem worth solving? Is someone going to pay me to solve this problem? And the only way you really get to that point is if you've got someone saying, hey, look, we absolutely have to have this, and how do we get you to go faster than you're going today? Because we're not going to win, or we're not going to get where we want to go if we don't have you with us. And so I think it was a lot of getting to that point of really understanding, like, what's a problem worth solving, what's one where you're going to get dragged kicking and screaming by your customer to solve that problem because they must have it to be successful. And so yeah, and even within getting to water, getting to those specific applications, use cases, really understanding it's a long journey. So
Well, yeah, I mean, are we talking, how much, how much resistance to failure, is that even the right word that you would use when, and in my head, I'm thinking, okay, we have this hypothesis, we have that there's a use case, we have a particular segment we can go after. Now we're going to go after it, and we're going to see if this works, and if it fails, understand why and how to pivot it to make it work. Like, how do you, just navigating through that space to get to a point where you're getting dragged, by your
yeah,
customer.
yeah, it's um I think some of it comes back to having a compelling commercial insight, right? Being able to do something, like, have a way of thinking about the world that's different than the people that are in it, and getting
Okay.
someone, excited about the possibility that your technology can unlock for them. And that then creates that momentum and alignment to be able to move forward. And so, there's a lot of like getting connected with the right people, moving through the technical proof points. But at the end of the day, like, it does come back, as much as, and this pains me to say as like an engineer and a technical person, a lot of times it comes back to the ability to like tell a compelling story that's rooted in
Mm,
data, right? It has to be, and especially in like water, like, it has to be rooted in data and has to be rooted in reality and the complexity of reality. But a lot of what we do is centered around, like, there's a different way of looking at your facility at this problem than you currently are.
mm,
And if you'll give us a few minutes to talk you through about what we see coming as outsiders,
yeah, yeah,
that really then helps to kind of shape, like, oh, actually, yeah, I never thought that we were making this core assumption because it's the way we've done things for 30 years. Why would we
right,
not? Why would we assume that that was an incorrect assumption? And it's only
mm,
incorrect because our tech can do something new that others can't. And
right,
so,
right.
yeah.
Yeah, I just so difficult to get those first data that
Yes.
are, that are really important, like we're talking about. So, so cool. Well, just I'll leave a trillion more questions on the shelf, and then we can get to where we started, which was the technology.
Mhm.
So again, just run through. You guys have a novel membrane technology that helps, to my understanding on the website, it helps specifically wastewater treatment plants purify waste streams. Is that accurate?
Yeah, absolutely. I think at a high level,
Whoa,
that's
look at
that's
that.
accurate. Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, no. So a lot of like where we go into, water is a central constituent of a lot of manufacturing, kind of, from chips to food and beverage to, lots of oil and gas, like lots of different industries leverage water as an intermediate to get to their product. And so,
Okay.
and in that process, often you can generate, there's a whole wide variety of waste that get generated, some that are very easy to treat and have been treated for a long time, and some that are particularly hard. And the hard ones usually come because they are particularly toxic or they're regulated in some way. The contaminants become it's very basically there's a legal requirement to address those contaminants before returning the water back to the general supply. And so um, that's where we help facilities kind of solve problems, is in that space where otherwise it might be really hard to meet compliance or discharge standards given their existing capacity or products.
And this particular solution is not necessarily for particulates. but it is
Correct.
something on a molecular level, right?
It is, yes. So we are separating ions from water. So if you think about the whole range of things that you have to remove as you're filtering things, you've got things that are really big. You think like, dirt, stuff like that that you might need to remove. You have very large filters, large pore filters that you can remove that. And you start getting down to smaller and smaller things, down to particles, bacteria, viruses, and the smallest of the small are those dissolved ions. And from a molecular size, they actually aren't even all that different than water. They're a little bit bigger than water, but you're talking about molecular sizes that you're separating, and so that's broadly, separating ions from water is broadly classified as the desalination process. We usually think about desalination as like, oh, seawater, and that's like a very particular use case of desalination, but fundamentally separating water and ions is a desalination process. And so that's the type that we do. We don't do
Well,
the other stuff. So yeah.
that's gonna be the title of this episode. Desalination is just ions, it's not necessarily salt.
Yep, exactly. Exactly.
All right. So what was happening before, or what is still happening today that is less efficient than your solution?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that you can actually look at the broader history of desalination and draw a parallel between what we're doing. So if you look at how we used to, if you take seawater, it's always been possible to purify seawater. 60, 70 years ago, people did it thermally. You boil water, you can basically, the water will evaporate, it will leave behind the salt. You can then condense the water and you've got pure water and you've got salt left behind. That's desalination. It's just using heat instead of membranes. And so, when the first reverse osmosis membranes were developed 60, 70 years ago, that was a revolution that you could use a material and you could use pressure to push water across a membrane. You could leave salt behind and you could create, this clean water without having to boil that water and take it through a different phase. And so that's really the other way that people have been, treating water is you can dump chemicals in, and those chemicals can cause, things to precipitate out and to fall out of that water. And that is one way that you can separate some of these ions from water. But basically, your routes to being able to treat ions is either adding chemicals or adding heat.
Hmm.
And so membranes, present a third route. But the challenge is that the membranes that have existed for a long time are very delicate. You can imagine trying to separate, ions from water that are all molecularly sized. You're going to have to use materials that aren't necessarily made to go into really complex or harsh environments. So they just break down. And so there's been a large portion of industry that's been left behind, that are still left using chemicals or heat in order to address their wastewater treatment challenges. And so what Membrion is doing is we're taking that last part of the industry that's been left behind, on the desalination journey, and we're bringing them up to the modern age. We're allowing them to use a membrane for the first time, which creates a far more sustainable and cost-effective, and physically smaller footprint for systems that they can install and leverage. And so that's the core journey that we help take customers on. Is the same thing that most people have gone through over the last few decades, but they got left behind.
Could you be just a little bit more detailed about what that section of the industry was? So I know we talked about
Mm-hmm.
wastewater treatment plants. Is
Yep.
that pretty much it, or is there anyone else?
No, it's, for the most part, it's actually like a lot of industrial facilities that are required to treat their
Huh.
waste. So it's anyone that's got, like acidic wastewater. So acids are really challenging to deal with. Things that have oxidizers or foulants, chelators. If you have residual particles, like these can be really complex streams from a desalination perspective. And often, what ends up happening for industry is you have to use many different steps to be able to treat these. And so what we're doing is we can go into these environments without needing to protect the membranes in the same way that you would otherwise. And so
Hmm.
that's where we can deliver something that's very compact and efficient from a treatment perspective.
What is this like oil and gas, or is this someone that like produces paint or something?
We tend to focus on industries like semiconductor, where you might have dissolved copper or tin, nickel, silver,
Okay.
palladium, things like that, where these metals have to be treated and removed. They're very complex. but you don't have a good option from a membrane basis to be able to do that. So.
So another thing that I believe through these conversations is a difficulty with desalination and membranes and things, or membrane fouling.
Mhm.
So is this still present in this type of technology, or is that mostly relevant with other approaches to desalination?
It's mostly so fouling is a perpetual challenge no matter what. So what we do is we don't eliminate fouling, but we are orders of magnitude more resistant to fouling, right? So for us, that means is it kind of shows up in two different ways. It means, in membranes, if you're trying to use a membrane and things are sticking to the surface of the membrane, it makes the desalination process less efficient, right? So you have two ways of dealing with that. You either make it less likely to stick, or you clean it more often. At some point, you're cleaning so often you're not actually treating, right? So there's a limit and a balance between when you actually need to do it. And so for us, we benefit from both sides of that equation because we have these ceramic materials. Typical foulants are just a lot less likely to stick to ceramics. It's kind of often it's kind of like is attracted to like, and ceramics are not like the organic foulants. They're different. They're inorganic as opposed to organic. So we don't get that sort of sticking behavior, which makes them a lot easier than we don't have to clean as often. But then the second benefit is that because stuff doesn't like to stick to it, when you do go to clean it, it's much faster, it's much more efficient, use less chemicals to do it.
Hmm.
And so we kind of get that double benefit where we can go into these environments where you might not be able to handle it because it has these high levels of foulants, but we can go in and do that desalination process just fine, even with those foulants present.
Wow. Was this when the technology was being developed, IP was being applied for things like this, was this always a potential vision for it, or did this come about in those grind of a year, the first 2 years or three?
Yeah, I mean, I think there was a little bit of both. I mean, I think that the technology was developed to survive really harsh applications, not
Okay.
in water, but actually in batteries initially.
Oh,
And so we eventually kind of made the connection to water. So there were certain things that we knew, hey, this was designed to do this really well. This also exists in water.
yeah, sorry, just that was curious to me. I don't know
Yeah.
how. What do you mean in batteries?
Yeah, so basically there's a type of battery called redox flow batteries. Those are kind of grid scale energy
Okay.
storage devices for storing like city-sized quantities of energy. Very low kind of commercial opportunities for them right now, but that was the initial problem we were trying to solve with the research grant that I was on.
Even with the introduction of all this AI data center stuff now?
There's absolutely, I think that's actually has the potential to really make these a lot more attractive
Wow.
than they have been historically. But the technology's been around for a long time,
Okay.
and the membrane was basically designed to work in those initially. That was like the grant that we were on, and so yeah, it wasn't. And initially, first couple of years of the company, we were really focused on like how do we solve this problem for this
Yeah.
market.
Wow.
But the market wasn't big enough to sustain a company, and so we basically ended up pivoting into water.
Fascinating. Oh my God. I just so many directions that idea of pivoting I think is so important. Well, okay. Well, I think that's good then, because I did want to ask you quickly how running Membrion with the stage of growth that you're in now with your different goals and things. I mean, we could have an entire single episode just talking about the different stages of growth you've been through. You did mention that you had just navigated a pivot, so that's something you could speak to. But outside of the getting from 0 to 1, which is really difficult that you
Mhm.
guys did successfully, what's different about running it now? How would you even describe the stage that you're in relative to then?
Yeah, we're in a growth stage for the company, meaning that we went from that first initial idea to early prototypes to being able to do pilot manufacturing to now having a full manufacturing line to having full commercial systems in the field. So we've done that full commercial journey from idea to fully deployed system. And so right now it's really about doing that, doing installing more systems fundamentally. That's the stage of growth that we're at. So it's about how do we build repeatable, scalable systems
Huh.
to deliver these projects to customers in the core markets that we see the greatest impact for our customers, being able to leverage it. So that's really where the company is at from a stage perspective.
So, and when you say repeatable, scalable systems, you're not just talking about the tech, you're also talking about business systems
Yes.
for
I'm
operationally
talking about
managing
business
people.
systems. That's right, exactly. All that, how we
Okay,
communicate across the team. We're a team of 30 right now, and
congrats.
continuing to grow. And so, from that perspective, it is about how do we make sure that everyone is aligned and working towards shared goals and effectively, all the way from initial customer touch points with marketing and sales to customer success, operations and manufacturing, implementation, product. They've all got to work together effectively. And so and quickly, because that's the other component is that we've got phenomenal investors that have come on board with Membrion, and they have expectations for how quickly we're going to
Okay,
grow. So we're in the process of meeting those expectations.
Greg, that sounds like a lot.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun.
All right, I got two final questions that I love to ask everybody, and the first one, outside of all of the other questions that you have provoked, I will keep to these two, and I guess we'll schedule another time and I can go through it.
Sure.
But but yeah, so for you right now, running the company, for your personal journey with the company, maybe, or just operationally, what's the biggest hurdle for you, and how is it also an opportunity?
Yeah. So for me personally, I think when starting Membrion, one of the things that I felt very committed to is that like I wanted to be an accelerant to the company, not a hindrance, right? So like I wanted to feel like the what I was contributing in whatever role that is for the company, that I was moving us faster instead of slower. So one of the key things kind of along this journey that I've been mindful of is that my rate of learning and execution has to be such that I am continuing to move us faster than rather than slowing us down because it's taking me too long to figure something out or I'm making the same mistake again and again in different ways. And so that's something that I've been very mindful of on this journey is making sure that that emphasis on how quickly I can learn. And I think that that is one of the strengths that I personally bring to the team is that I listen well and I learn quickly, and that helps in a lot of ways to drive us as an organization to be able to capitalize on opportunities or see things that might not otherwise be obvious within the market or with our customers as ways that we can help and support them. And I think that's created a lot of, with for sure the support of the team that embodies a lot of those similar values, creates the opportunities that we have.
Yeah, that how within that. Thank you for sharing that because that's
Hmm.
really cool and nuanced. I think it'd be easier to do something that was more tactical
Hmm.
engineering, whatever. So, and it's so important. How are there systems around you, or you mentioned the team? Like, how are you held accountable for that contribution?
Hmm. Yep. So, I mean, I think that one thing that we do really well as a team is that we set very transparent goals for the entire company around what we're trying to do at any given time, and then it becomes really about how we execute towards those goals. And so that's that spans everything from revenue to product to uptime to all sorts of things. And so I've got for me personally, I've got the board that holds me accountable to the goals that we set for the
Okay.
team. Like we all have kind of an individual level of accountability that no one on the team needs someone over their shoulder saying like, hey, you got to get this done because you committed to get it done. It's that self motivation of we want to be better, we want to see how good we can get, and that's going to drive us to hit these goals that we set, which are aggressive, but attainable, with focus. So
Yep. Okay. Gonna continue with this filter. This whole theme is membranes and filtering and all this stuff. So I'm
sure,
doing this.
indeed.
I'm doing this with my questions. So
That's
I'm,
right.
I'm glad. So my last one for you then. All the work that you're doing. Clearly, I think your technology is contributing positively. to the world
Mhm.
and all the people, the industry that you're serving. For you, with all this work, what inspires you?
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of it comes back to it is the impact of the work that I think makes the biggest deal for me. And I think it was one of those things that coming into starting Membrion, I was very mindful that like, we were going to be more sustainable. We were going to create, opportunities to make the world a better place. It didn't really like it's however it started to feel really different after I had my first kid about 4 years ago, where all of a sudden like that component of like, okay, yeah, like I for myself, my family, my friends want to create a better world, that's more sustainable in the long run, more circular, less wasteful, with what we're doing, and Membrion certainly enables that. But having my son really, make really brought that home around like, okay, yeah, and like, this is somewhat like there's an opportunity to create a better world for a particular person. And I think it's just for me, like I don't know what it was that just really brought that idea home, that like this is more than just an opportunity to do good for society, but it's an opportunity to do good for someone that a particular person that I really love and care about. And so yeah, it's been even more motivating the last few years, with that in mind. But I think we've got great opportunities in front of us to really create a lot of good, and love the customers that we work with that join
Yeah.
us, in that. So
Well, shout out to your son.
thanks.
Shout out. Thank you for the inspiration.
Hmm.
Well, Greg, this has been so cool. I really appreciate all of the knowledge that you just dropped, boom, all across the conversation. There's a lot that I'm going to be pulling from this. A lot of puns I'm going to be wanting to make about the membrane
Excellent.
thing. I
Love
could
it.
have right
Love
there, but I
puns.
didn't. If anyone else was inspired to follow along or get in touch, what's the best way to do so?
I think reaching out to us via our website, info@membrion.com, is a great way. I'm also on LinkedIn, so would love to connect with folks.
Cool. Well, Greg, thank you so much. I'm excited to see
Absolutely.
you guys
Thanks,
go.
Blake. Yeah, I appreciate it.